John Plumstead joins the 80/20 Real Estate Show on this episode. Really awesome guy. He's working a full-time job as a professor at West Point Military Academy, teaching mental performance to cadets there, which is really cool. And really on this episode, we mostly talk mindset, what's made him successful. He was a walk-on for the Army football team his freshman year, was able to become a team captain by his senior year, is a father of 4 sons, happily married. So he talks a lot about mindset. He was deployed in Afghanistan for 12 months. I don't want to get too much into his story now and let you guys enjoy it on the interview, but a ton of good actionable nuggets that you guys can take from here, both on the mindset side and just overall quality of life. Lightly touch on some real estate too, so enjoy. Plum, my guy, what's going on?
I'm doing world class, as
Love
you
it.
said earlier. I'm doing well, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing world class as well. Shout out to our software coach, Dan Martell. I always like to be creative when somebody asks me how I'm doing, or when someone asks me how I'm doing, that's almost typical conversation or something that just happens so many times. It's almost like robotic. How's it going? Good. How are you? Good. So I always like to catch people on their toe and give them a little spark of inspiration and energy to start. So before we started going live, Plum asked me how I do, and I said I was doing world class, but I've been saying like fantastically well, absolutely amazing, everything like that. And when you speak it, it really does affect you, which is crazy and interesting, and probably good insight to how this interview is going to be, guys. Because Plum, I'm going to call him Plum just because I'm a nickname guy, but John Plumstead is his full name. Thank you so much for coming on, man. And we got connected a few months back, and he reached out hearing this podcast, 80/20 podcast, 80/20 Real Estate podcast, which definitely talks a lot of tactical real estate from some of the top investors all over the country. But me personally, I always put my own kind of taste on it, and what I believe to be the ultimate 80/20 success hacking life is really mental performance, reflecting and understanding yourself so you can kind of make educated pivots in your life and decisions and really optimize to get the most out of your day, get the most out of your life, live with as much joy and happiness as possible, because that's really the entire purpose of life. John Plumstead is someone that follows that narrative and lives that life as well. He is an Army guy, successful real estate investor, which we'll touch on. And the coolest thing to me, he emailed me from an 80/20 interview saying how much of a fan he was, which I greatly and genuinely appreciate. But he's also a performance coach at the United States Military Academy at West Point. Was kind enough to send me this shirt here. I'm always supporting the guests because they do make the show. But this is going to be a cool interview because I'm going to let him expand on his story. But having that degree in sport and performance psychology and being able to teach that as your day job and give so much back to the Army, which I know you're a huge Army guy and live and breathe that with your team as well. So I think he's just going to be able to give you guys some cool nuggets. And like I've said, and on the Tyler Austin interview we were talking about, you might just be able to take one nugget from this. People will take different nuggets that's applicable and be able to help them out in their day-to-day in their life, which is what we're going to be talking about all today. So Plum, my guy, man, I appreciate you coming on. It's cool.
Absolutely. So you mentioned that when someone asks you how you're doing, you like to say different things. One of the things I always say is, this is the best day of my life. Or like, today's the best day of my life. And people look at me like I'm crazy, but I'm like, if you don't think that once in a while, you're never going to have a better day. So let's make today the best day of our life. Let's make this conversation the best day of our life, brother.
Couldn't have said it better myself, man. I'm getting fired up over here. Could you give myself and the listeners kind of a better or a more expanded idea of what kind of like your day-to-day looks like now, and then we'll kind of backtrack to how you got to this point?
Yeah, so we're COVID-19 right now, so it's rather unique, kind of working from home. But before COVID-19 hit, dad to 4 awesome boys, been married 10 years, live at West Point, so on base at the United States Military Academy. I'm a active duty major in the Army, and my job here at West Point is to teach cadets how to be their best. I'm a performance coach, so that could be kind of in academics. How can you be more confident? How can you stay organized? How can you do some planning to make sure you can do really well academically. But then we also work with a lot of athletes. How can you make your athletic goals come true? How can you make sure you keep your composure under pressure? Then we just look at the cadet experience and say, I want to be able to work with any cadet and say, how can I help you be better? So that's kind of my day-to-day, is helping cadets be their best. They get to define what their best is. They get to define what their goals are. And it's my job to help them break through those mental barriers, make a plan, and get there.
Love it. One thing I'm going to link in the show notes for you guys is actually a TEDx talk in Idaho that John gave, titled Why You're Ready to Be a Parent, which was awesome. It's relatively short, so very digestible for you guys, but he talks a lot about that. And one thing as we start going to backtrack, he walked onto the Army football team, if I'm remembering correctly, when I think you weren't even sure if you wanted to even make that attempt, and then ended up being a captain on the team, shaking hands with the president your senior year, which was awesome. And I'm a huge sports guy, as many of you know, kind of jamming my words there. So that was super, super cool to see his story there. And I kind of want to unpack in this interview what Plum is able to teach at West Point, and then also him personally, kind of what was going through his head mentally, and kind of just speaking out loud through that experience and picking off nuggets for you guys. I'll kind of just be like looking for nuggets to pick off and maybe recalibrate for you guys so you guys can hear everything like that. But let's take it back, Plum, to around that time frame, maybe even high school. And I got asked this on a podcast, on Raul Balufe's podcast, which was a good question. I kind of want to know what you were like in high school. Like, what was your personality type? What kind of guy were you in high school? And then we can transition to that into Army life.
I think in high school I was a great football player, and every ounce of energy I had in the world went towards being a great football player. Just single tracked, like, I'm going to be the best football player I could be. And then I'm from northern Michigan. I was completely prepared to go to Michigan State or maybe like Central Michigan, play football there. Long story short, at a certain point in my football career, I realized that those schools were not knocking on my door and they weren't interested in me coming to play football for them. So I read a couple books about West Point during that time. Was always interested in service in the military. 9/11 happened when I was a sophomore in high school, so I felt called to serve. And I just, I didn't have a family history of military service or anything, but I got this idea in my head. I'm going to play football at West Point. Like, I don't know exactly where it came from, but I was like, I'm going to do this. So in high school, when I started telling people I was going to go to West Point, they kind of looked at me like I was crazy. I even talked to some teachers that were like, you're not a great student. Like, you realize West Point is very difficult academically. And I just had it in my head, like, I'm going to do it. And I also had a great support system with, my family, my girlfriend at the time, who is now my wife, supporting me, right? But I just got it in my head, like, I'm going to do this. I don't care what the world says to me. I'm going to do it. So called West Point, called the football coaches. I was like, hey, coach, I'm ready to sign up. Like, let's do this, right? And coach is like, hey, we don't want you either, right? They're a little nicer than that. But they're basically like, you're from northern Michigan. You're not that fast. You're not that tall. You're not that good at football. Like, go find someplace else. And I thought a little bit about kind of going to a different level of football, right? They have different divisions, so maybe I go down and play at a different level. But I was like, no, I'm going to West Point. Like, I don't know how it's going to happen, but I'm going to go to West Point. And at the time, I was also a good shot putter. So I got in contact with the West Point track coaches and actually got into West Point as a shot putter. And then when I got there, I met some football players and met one of the coaches. And I was like, hey, coach, I want to walk on the football team. And, just kind of happened. But I knew from, we'll call it sometime my senior year in high school, that I was going to go to West Point and I was going to play football. And I was going to be really good at football at West Point, or I was going to die during the process, right? Like, that's how committed and crazy I was just like, I don't know how exactly this is going to work, but I'm going to go until I collapse. And luckily, walked on, played some special teams first couple years, and then was a starting linebacker and team captain my senior year. So I'm very proud of that, and it was a good experience. And go Army, beat Navy.
Go Army, beat Navy. Love it. What were the first couple years like playing special teams? Because I know I follow NFL a lot more closely than I do college football. So I do see, wide receivers on special teams and linebackers and fullbacks, everything. They'll start, if they're middle to late round or undrafted rookies, they'll kind of start out on special teams. And a lot of it's through grit, hard work, being reliable. They end up getting put into opportunities where they can transition more into like a skill role or one of the 22 positions on offense or defense. What were the first couple years that you said where you were on special teams? Like you still had, obviously you had the mental conviction that you were going to go to West Point, get successful. So when you got accepted, or the onboarding onto being on that team must have been huge for you. Like, holy crap, I was able to actually walk onto the West Point football team. What was your mental like day to day being on special teams? Was it the same thing? Like, you know what? And you kind of said it already, but you know what? I'm going to end up being a captain, or I'm going to be starting linebacker, everything like that. And just speaking through it, you remind me of one of my favorite athletes and football players local to Baltimore, Ray Lewis. He was the same thing. He barely got offers. He got into Miami. They thought he was too small, not heavy enough, not tall enough, not fast enough, everything like that. And similarly, he just had a conviction that he was like going to outwork everybody and be the best linebacker at Miami that there ever was. And then same thing when he got to the Ravens. So I'm curious to kind of hear, if you remember in some extent of detail, what it was like when you were playing special teams, and what was the gap like between those first few years and then becoming captain. You must have been able to bring on some leadership principles as well to unite players that wanted to elect you as captain.
Yeah, I think so there's a couple steps there. The first step was I was on the team, but I wasn't even on special teams, right? Like an NFL roster has 53 players, and our roster when I was a freshman at West Point was like 150. So not only was I a long ways from seeing the field as a linebacker, I was a long ways from seeing the field as a special teamer, right? Like I was fighting just to be a special teamer. So I was working really hard, and then our first game, I was hoping to be on the travel squad. I knew I wasn't going to play, but I was hoping to be on the travel squad, and I didn't make the travel team. And the game was Army against Boston College at Boston College, and I got a pass to go to the game, but I sat in the stands during the game, and like I was sitting there, everyone was like, yeah, this is awesome college football. And I was maybe as mad and emotionally fueled as I'd ever been. I was like, this is never going to happen again. Like, I don't know what it's going to take, but I promise this is never going to happen again. And I went back to practice and like got in a fight with a senior almost every practice. Every time after the play, I was pushing people. I was trying to be a meathead. Special teams would be at the end of practice, okay? And no one liked practice in special teams because you were tired. And like everyone who was on special teams, they actually wanted to be a starter, right? So they weren't motivated. And I was this kid that I wanted nothing more than to see the field. So at the end of practice, in these special team drills, I would go as hard as I could. Like everyone's going like 50, 60% effort, and I'm going like 150% effort. And I've got upperclassmen linebackers going like, Plum, dude, it's the end of practice. You need to chill. And I'm going like, bro, I'm not sitting in the stands anymore. Like this is done. You are in my way right now. So I would just go crazy every single day. The amount of effort I put in. It's not just that effort. It's that mental game too, when you've got upperclassmen telling you to chill, and like, no, I am willing to have upperclassmen yell at me and tell me to chill because that's not in line with my goal and who I want to be. And then I got on special teams, and I would just try to bring that same mentality, just that like, crazy kamikaze on kickoff team, running down there and hitting someone as hard as I could. And I just tried to keep getting better and keep getting better and keep getting better. So
I love that, man. That kind of is, as you're talking through that, reminds me of David Goggins in his book, Talk About Boat Crew 2. I don't know if you're a David Goggins guy. He's been in a bunch of different areas of military, Hell Weeks, all that type of stuff, and is pretty much like a PhD in either mental performance or just seeing how long you can take, the extent of how you can push your body through the mental aspect of yourself. I don't know if you follow David Goggins or not, but that's kind of what you reminded me of talking through that.
Yeah, I love that. I think the hard part that a lot of people struggle with is you watch a David Goggins video on YouTube and you're like, yes, yes, but then you don't do anything, right? Or maybe you're the meathead that works really hard, but you don't read any books about mindset. You don't do that extra work. What I'd like to think I try to embody, and I'm certainly not perfect at it, but this idea that like I want to study the best of the best to figure out what they do on a daily basis. But then hopefully I'm also willing to put in the work, because being good at anything and being world class at anything takes so much work, So trying to balance both of that is something I constantly struggle with. But I think too many people miss that. They love the David Goggins stuff. They love watching all those motivational videos from other people. Or Jocko Willink, he's another stud. People are like, I love Jocko. Like, when's the last time you woke up at 4:30 in the morning and did some pull-ups? When's the last time you did some burpees? You got to do both.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a solid shot of motivation. It's almost like drinking a coffee. If you're not taking the action or kind of like pushing yourself. I don't follow Jocko as nearly as much as I follow Goggins, but it's kind of like a coffee. It's kind of like a temporary thing. You might have an hour or two of energy or motivation, but it's not going to stick unless you kind of have the mindset and the video matches the audio, to quote Matt Aitchison. We're actually doing that on a daily basis. But that's cool, man. I want to continue through. What was your senior year like? I saw on the TEDx talk shaking George W. Bush's hand pregame, and kind of what made you captain, even though you've been alluding to it, just being able to put in work, go 150% during the end of practices on special teams when people were telling you chill, or Plum, chill, bro. Like, it's end of practice. I'm not trying to get lit up on a kick return or something, whatever it may have been.
Yeah, I think, huge honor that I don't have the words to communicate how much I appreciate that my teammates voted me a captain, truly. But I'd like to think it had something to do with just what we were talking about, like working hard every single day, but also understanding that being a leader, like, no one wants to work for a dictator, right? No one wants to be on a team with a dictator. So my goal as a leader was, hey, I want to work hard every day, but I also want to include everyone else in that hard work. Instead of isolating people and saying, hey, why aren't you working harder? Try to lead by example, and then look back at someone and say, hey, let's go. You can do this too. Like, you can go harder. I believe in you. So every time I interacted with my teammates, I hope what I did, and I think what led to me being voted the captain, was just this inclusiveness of a team and being like, hey, I'm going to show you my strengths, my weaknesses. The only thing I can guarantee you is I'm going to keep trying to get better every single day, and I think you can too. Let's go together,
Absolutely, love that. And what I'm thinking of now is kind of a mix between the Michael Jordan documentary, The Last Dance. I don't know if you saw that 10-part series, 10 hours.
That was great.
That was great. And I also saw a post the other day. It was a teammate, I think it was Jordan Clarkson, that played with both Kobe Bryant and LeBron James, and he was talking about their different leadership styles. I think you and I kind of resonate more with the LeBron James type leadership style, but also you definitely had the Jordan mindset and the Kobe mindset. LeBron is more so kind of like I would say like high EQ, high emotional intelligence. He's very much looking at each player, trying to connect with each player and meet them on whatever their mental wavelength is, and is the same way he comes back. He's like, hey, I'm going to put in this work. Just follow my example. I'll take the heavy lifting. Just come along with me and, guarantee that you're going to take daily action and try to improve yourself. Where Jordan and Kobe, they have the mindset of you either meet them where I'm at or you're not going to come along for the ride. But they're insanely competitive and want to get the best out of you, but kind of only their way. And I think the best leadership and also the best people, which is what I try to do, far from perfect. Like we said before we went on air, everybody is a work in progress until the day that they go. But I try to do in life, leadership, whatever, is I kind of can pluck, and I genuinely think this, that you can pluck at least one good insight from every single person that you meet and kind of add that to your tool bag, whether it's like mental, tactical in business, tactical in life. You can pluck any type of like a mental framework, some type of foundation that they think through. Every single person, you can do that. So with like leadership or trying to be the best person, that's like a daily thing that I've done for years and years and years. some of it without knowing, and a lot of it now being intentional. The last few years, just like what can I get from this type of person here? So I've definitely taken some stuff from you as well, just hearing you more so in the 80-20 calls, talking with you hearing your TEDx talk, which is super interesting. And I kind of want to talk, and we'll leave it open to go down a path that you want to go through. We've heard more so the Army football side. I still want to talk, kind of in unison, the family structure, because you're a young guy to have 4 boys, kind of like what your relationship is like with your wife on the home front and leading Team Plumstead, which is essentially your family unit, which is pretty cool. I hope I have something that sounds that cool once I have my own wife and kids. But I kind of want to hear how you lead your family unit, 4 boys and a wife, and then also hear about the full-time day job, what you're actually teaching, which I'm sure we've been going through a lot of that already, because a lot of that is leadership and mental are 2 big 80-20 mindsets. So I kind of want to hear from you, and we'll kind of just play some conversational ping pong there and give you a lot of runway to go through both. But I'm excited to hear kind of what that's like on the family front first.
Yeah, so I feel honored to be a dad and a husband. Also, like a little nervous because that's a lot of responsibility, right?
Yeah.
I'm 35 years old, right? No, 34 years old. 34 years old. I still feel too young to have like a grown-up life with, be a major in the Army and have 4 kids and that type of stuff. But I think as I look at family, it's like everything we've been talking about. It's trying to instill an ethos or principles in my sons that are like, hey, do your best. You're going to make tons of mistakes, but let's try to keep getting better every day. And then whether you want to call it leadership or you want to call it interactions, like the golden rule matters. Treating people with respect. Everyone you come in contact with, treating them with respect matters. And then with my wife, we've been together since 2000. So we started dating freshman year in high school, and we've been together since. So that's 20 years together. And like any couple, we have good days and bad days. I tell people a lot of couples mesh because they have a type A personality and a type B personality. My wife and I are not like that at all. We're both type A's. So we're the type that's like, ah! But then we find a great solution and it works for us, right? So I look at it like it's also the joy in my life, right? Like trying my best to maximize my time, my mental space, focus, and concentration on my family, because that's what's most important to me. But I think the struggle a lot of people have is like everyone says their family comes first, but who actually can live that? Who can actually spend more time and focus on their family than anything else in their day? I think it's really tough, right? And I'm constantly looking for feedback. I'm constantly going out of balance. I often work too much, right? My ego says I want to be the best officer I can be, and I want to help so many cadets, and I want to make the world a better place. And I'm having to remind myself, like, hey, none of that matters if I'm not taking care of my family first, right? And it's something that hopefully everyone with a sense of awareness is thinking about, because I think it's really easy to be out of balance there. What do you think, Carlos?
Yeah, well, I appreciate you sharing, and part of the reason I wanted to ask that is because I know that there are probably a lot of parents, fathers that listen to this podcast. So I wanted to hear that. It's good for you to hear that. A few things that I was picking up in my head there was, one, it kind of reminded me of Conor McGregor talking about him and his wife, where before he was, $100 million earner on a single fight with Floyd Mayweather and this big UFC guy, she was with him from the beginning when he was, I can't remember the exact job, but he wasn't, a multimillionaire, world-known guy. So your wife was there sophomore year when you first started voicing the intention that you were going to be a stud walk-on at West Point, or at Army football, excuse me. And one thing that's important there that I just want to unpack is it's important who you keep around you in your circle when you're expressing these intentions, because you should be able to be in an environment where you can express intentions for like the highest type levels of your life. Like I say crazy wild, what people would deem crazy wild stuff or things that I want to do in my life. Like if I just had to sit and think what would be like the coolest, sickest outcome for my life, like how could I help the most people and just leave the biggest dent and legacy, a lot of people would say, you know, like that's crazy, or they'd be like, God, Los is a weird guy. But you need to be able to have friends, a wife, partner that you're able to confide in, and she, you know, kind of like boosts the fire that you have or stokes the fire that you have in setting those intention, because it's a day-to-day consistent thing. So one, that was definitely awesome. The second thing, when you're talking to Team Plum, that I love that you said is you're pretty much giving like principles of life to your family. You know, like we're going to work harder. Shout out Dan Martell again. He was telling his kids, he's someone who's extremely successful as well. And he tells his kids, like on a daily basis, it sounds like Martells we're people that do hard things. We're going to work hard. So it was like very similar in hearing that. The most formative years are when you're like a child like that. So it's almost like coded into your framework of how you think, which is super, super powerful. And that's almost like the foundation, guys, is pretty much mental frameworks that your thoughts filter through. That's going to like dictate your action, how you see the world, everything like that. So that's pretty much for me, how I see that for me are kind of like principles that I've been more intentional in having written out, which Plum kind of just laid out that he does to Team Plumstead, or he says to Team Plumstead's kids and wife. And really just kind of your principles are almost like your guiding source to your reality, or like that's how you perceive and work through the world. So it's like I feel like everybody, if there's an applicable thing, if you're into the mindset stuff, I'm sure you are if you're still listening to this, but that's almost like the first thing to kind of iron out. How do you source like your reality of world? And if you don't take time thinking about this at some point in your life, you know, in my opinion, I think it's a missed opportunity there. Plum, to loop back to your question before you give insight on those 2 points, which I'd love to hear. I think it's totally true that it may not match like some people, and I'm guilty of this as well. And I've definitely been trying to be more intentional about it the last couple of years, especially since my family is now completely spread out. I'm the last one in Maryland. Younger sister is in Charleston, South Carolina for pharmacy. My mom's older sister, 4 nieces and brother-in-law are in North Carolina, where I was just visiting with them a couple weeks ago. And then my dad moved to Miami, so I have to be more intentional. And it reminds me of a Godfather line. If you guys listen to this, you know I'm a big Godfather guy as well. But I think the quote that Vito Corleone says is, a man who doesn't spend enough time with his family is no man at all. So that's almost like something that sticks in my head too, and I want to be intentional on. So to answer your question, I definitely think a lot of people do have that intention, but there's something mentally that stops them. Some people that stops them, that allows them to not put the actual genuine full intention on their family.
Yeah, I think it's tough. One thing I would comment on the principles, I love that. One thing I think too many people get wrong with principles, though, is they'll sit down for an exercise and they'll say, what do I want my family's principles to be? Right? And they'll come up with some awesome stuff, but I think a better way to do that exercise is to look backwards and say, how have we lived our life for the last 3 years? Right? Like, what principles are we already living, and are we happy with those? But too many people, I think, back to that, just watching the David Goggins thing and then not taking action. Too many people might be like, these are the principles that I want my family to live by. But if that is so far connected from how you're currently doing it, it's probably not going to come to fruition. Mm-hmm. So whenever a big part of trying to be your best is also behavior change and habits and routines, and how do you do that improvement, right? So much of it is looking backwards first, or increasing your awareness first. So if I look at the principles that I want to instill in my family, like that hard work is important, but I also want having fun to be important. Mm-hmm. But if I look backwards and I look at the last 3 to 6 months, I'd probably say that my kids would say I focused more on hard work at my job than I have at having fun, right? So as I look forward, maybe the next 6 months, instead of putting so much focus on the hard work, maybe those are out of balance, and I need to put fun higher, because that's something that's really important to me, and maybe something that's been sacrificed recently, you know?
Mm-hmm. That's totally true, and a good point that you're subtly bringing up that I'm going to put a little magnifying glass on, which I'm huge on, is having some type of rhythm to how you reflect on your life. So Plum was saying, like, I think the time duration you said was 6 months, but you guys also have to understand that it's not like a one-time set it and forget it. So for me, like, I'm always, like, on a weekly basis, quarterly basis, everything, quarterly, annually, like, I'm always kind of reviewing where I'm at, because you're going to have to make course adjustments. Like, when a plane takes off, it sets if you're flying from Baltimore to Los Angeles, it's going to type some stuff. I'm not the science tech guy, but you're going to type some stuff in to almost get you there on autopilot, essentially, or light management from the pilot. But if there's wind, delay, if they can't land at the airport for whatever reason, they need to do a circle around, you're going to have to be able to make those adjustments for the same destination that you're trying to go to. Same exact thing is true for the principles you lay out or the goals that you set, and kind of seeing how you projected on fulfilling those. Like, I have to do that all the time and make course adjustments. So that's kind of what Plum was just going through there as well, which is super, super important.
No, I like it, man. I like all of it. I often talk to cadets about climbing the mountain, like the figurative mountain. I say, hey, where are you right now? What does the top of the mountain look like for you? Like, you get to define that, and my job is to help you get to the top of your mountain. And how do you get there? You take a step every day, and there may be times where you realize you're on the wrong trail, or there may be times you realize you're climbing the wrong mountain, right? Maybe you thought your goal was to be a doctor, because maybe you had family pressure and stuff, and then at some point you realize, like, I don't really want to be a doctor, right? Or, to the listeners out there, maybe you've set your goal as a real estate investor to, create this big empire, but in reality, you don't need that much money. You need, enough money to sustain your life. But that's how I look at it. I like the plane analogy, but I usually use the mountain. Like, you're climbing the mountain. What does the top of the mountain look like for you? Is it the right mountain that we're climbing? And then how do we get there?
Yeah. And another good nugget just from the conference or the mastermind we've been in the last couple days, when the guy who was running it, Dan, was touching base with people, kind of talking on this similar subject, because it's cool, because there's accountability built in for any type of mastermind that you're in typically, or programs that you're in, whatever. And people, you lay out these plans, and then you see them 4 months down the line, 3 months down the line. The question that he asked that I loved is, okay, cool. And someone was just talking about what they projected out from the last time we were in San Diego in October to now, where it was supposed to be in Atlanta, I think, but it was virtual due to COVID. And he was like, okay, cool. So the first question I asked, he goes, okay, cool. After he said, like, where he was at, everything like that, he said, okay, cool. What have you added and taken away from your day so far? Like, I saw before we were getting this set up, I have iCal too. So I have all my stuff in there. So he's like, okay, so if you want to get in better shape, what type of stuff have you just added to, like, your daily calendar? And he was just like it was like, it seemed like such a normal question to him, but it was so insightful to me, because I'm like, damn, it really is that simple. If you want to do stuff, add things to your day. Like, what are you doing on a day basis? Because your days really are it really turn into your life, like, on a day-to-day basis, which is interesting and insightful to me.
That's such a powerful concept, right? There's a couple concepts that are the key to success. One of them, I think, is having a growth mindset. Basically, being able to look at the world and realize that you can improve, right? Another super important concept is right there, what you're saying, this idea that to get better, you have to put the work in today, right? And you can't delay. And then also that whatever the work is, you have to somewhat enjoy it, because it turns into your life, right? The comment you just said of, like, this moment becomes this minute, becomes this hour, becomes this day, week, this year becomes this life. So we also have to balance that sacrifice of, like, I want to work really hard and try to be my best, but there's a good chance when we get to the top of the figurative mountain, like we're not satisfied. We don't just want to sit there and live at the top for the rest of our life too. So we have to try to enjoy the journey as well. So what you bring up is, yes, you have to change your day. If you want to change your life, you have to change your days. But then the second part of that is, hopefully those changes you make are leading you to the top of the mountain, but hopefully they're also helping you enjoy your day more today. Because who wants to get to the top of the mountain if it just sucks the whole way you're walking there, you know?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I want to hear, before we move on to the next point here, I kind of want to hear what you already went over a little bit, kind of like your guiding principles for life and also what you instill in Team Plumstead as well.
Yeah, I think it's a work in progress. Okay,
as we all are, brother.
I would say the biggest one is the golden rule. Like, I think my personality is such. I love relationships. I love getting to know people, and if you want to interact with people at all, the golden rule wins hands down. So making sure you treat people with respect is so important to me. I think. We often talk about what's more important, street smarts or book smarts. I like to tell people both of those are important. Don't try to pick. Mm-hmm. So I believe in education, whether that's a formal or informal education. I think that's super important. I hear a lot of people talk about how they want to get involved in real estate investing, and I ask them what books or podcasts they've listened to, and maybe they've listened to like an hour of a podcast. Mm-hmm. And they're like, what book should I read? I'm like, well, when I was getting started, I listened to every single Bigger Pockets episode that was published, and I read every book I could find on Amazon. I shouldn't say every book. I read at least 20 books on Amazon about real estate before I started getting into it, right? But then, so that's my book smarts. On the other hand, we also bought a live-in flip, and I built custom cabinets myself, and I did molding all around the baseboards, and I painted more than I'd ever want to paint, and I've roofed, and I've done that stuff, which I would consider the street smarts, right? So that's another principle I want to instill in my kids. It's like, hey, education is important. Make sure you're getting experiences, but you're also doing the work and reading books or whatever medium you like. I think having fun and going on adventures is super, super fun. My family, we really like to travel. It's a little cost prohibitive to fly anywhere with a family of 6. But during grad school, I went to grad school out at the University of Idaho, which was a great experience. But during the summer, we went to basically every national park on the West Coast. And for like 6 weeks, we were traveling all in a vehicle. It was an amazing experience. But I think experiences like that help you believe in the grind that can be day to day when you can reward yourself like that. And then I think overall as Team Plumstead, I just look at it like, whether it's a football team or I've got a lot of Army experience as well, like being a platoon in the Army or being a group in a company. I just want our team to be a unit and to do things together and to realize that sometimes we're going to argue and we're going to fight and we're going to cry and it's not going to be good. But at the end of the day, we have a trust between our family that no matter what, we're going to love and respect each other.
I love that. We have some aligned principles as well. I have mine up here on Evernote that I'm usually tweaking and have printed out, stuff like that. But number one at the top, every single time, I look at this every single day, always have fun. The purpose of life is to enjoy life. So it's like, I know that, and I don't want to sound like, damn, I'm just going to take all my money and go on vacation and do all this fun stuff. But you can have fun, and like Richard Branson, all those people, they kind of share a similar sentiment of whatever you do for your work or career is really just like play, and you can still have fun with that, and that's what the ultra successful people are always doing. But I'm very similar, always be learning, constant never-ending improvement. Couple things I try to work on are like, some of them are, I'll kind of condense a few of them, but essentially like delayed gratification, long-term mindset. I like doing kind of fork in the road principles as well, just because your brain the reptilian brain is very, very simple. So I like giving like 2 options, so it's almost like overly simplistic. So an example of a fork in the road principle or mental framework that I like to go through is one of 2 things, and this is actually a good one for you guys to potentially incorporate as well. But it's either everything you're doing is either growing your legacy or it's not. So I like those type of things. So when you're deciding to do something, or maybe like the times that you get tested are almost like Plum at the end of practice doing special teams. That's the time when you get tested, like, should I do this work? Should I finish this work thing tonight? Should I just say, what, screw it, I'm going to eat a pizza tonight, even if you have like certain nutrition or body goals, whatever. So that's when you have to think like, if I do this, I'm either growing my legacy or I'm not. Like, and you can do that for a bunch of different stuff. You can make fork in the road decisions like that. So your brain, when you're going down an action path of yes or no to doing something, it makes it easier to go towards the desired path. If you were kind of just like third person, just watching yourself instead of first person in the day to day, you can kind of step out and it makes it a little bit more easier. One thing we haven't touched on, which I'm huge on, not sure if you are, is like practices of like mindfulness, meditation, things like that, which in my opinion, one of the things, and I've felt this so many times in my life, is when you're in those fork in the road decisions, it almost lets you be a little bit more poised in the pocket, if you will, and you can kind of be a little bit slower in going towards the easy, comfortable thing to do versus the thing that's probably more resistance, but that's actually good for you. And that goes along with present moment, focused work. I'm just kind of looking at some of my principles that may align with you. I'm also going to share. I wanted to pull this up. I don't know why I had intuition when we were originally going to do the podcast last week, but I had intuition to share a mental framework of mine that may be good for no matter what age you are. But this is actually a prayer that I've had on my room probably since I was like 10, 12 years old. I think one of my grandmothers gave me. But it's the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi in Italy. And I actually have one of my sisters got me a chain for my birthday that has the same guy on here. I'll show because he's a little dog on there. That's cool. But this is a good mental framework, and it's something that the way that we're going to talk about it, or we've been talking about it, so I would see this pretty much like every morning, every night that I wake up. And I've noticed in my life, if I was like 10, 12, 11 years old reading this, I probably didn't think much of it at the time, but it's really, thinking of it now, 30 years old, it's really shaped a lot of how I view life and how I act as a person. And I'll go through it quickly here, but it pretty much says, Lord, make me an instrument of the peace. Where there is hatred, let me show love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is discord, unity. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is error, truth. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is sadness, joy. And where there is darkness, light. O Divine Master, grant that I may not seek to be consoled as to console, to be loved as to love, for it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is dying that we are born into eternal life. I just pulled up a little different wording of the one that I actually have, but it's essentially the same thing. But thinking of it now, that's something that I've seen on a daily basis, essentially, whenever I'm staying in my room. It's been through 3 different houses of mine through the years, or 4, I guess, including college. But that's definitely something that would be good, not necessarily that, but something to speak to your children when they're younger, or even if you're not depending on whatever age you are, it's something good to see daily. And I can definitely tell in my own experience in life, that's definitely something that's like guided how I'm programmed, how I act, how I behave, and kind of how life has turned out for me.
I like it. So lot there. A couple things I would take away or comment on about principles that you brought up. One is the delayed gratification thing. Mm-hmm. That's something I've actually evolved my thinking on. So if you would have asked me 2 or 3 years ago, I would be like, hey, that's a difference between someone who's successful and someone who is not successful, is delayed gratification. Mm-hmm. And what that led to is me and my family would live very frugally. We would do live-in flips, so we'd buy the crappiest house in the neighborhood. We'd live in it. We'd fix it all up. There's times where we'd go, 6 months without a kitchen. It was terrible. But then at the end, we'd sell the house and we'd make a bunch of money and be like, see, delayed gratification works every time, right? And what I've realized is if you're optimizing life to be most successful, then delayed gratification probably is most important. But if you're trying to optimize life for enjoyment and fun, then delayed gratification, I'm not exactly sure how it fits, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the one thing I try to balance now is I don't really care about being successful financially nearly as much as I care about having a great time in my life and feeling fulfilled with my family, right? Like money's part of that equation, don't get me wrong. But so the delayed gratification thing is interesting. I'm not saying it's wrong because it's absolutely right, but it's something I've thought about. Mm-hmm. One principle that I didn't say before is working out. Like, I'm an Army guy, so it's easy to just label me like, hey, of course he's going to talk about doing push-ups and stuff. But working out, physical exercise on a daily basis, everyone thinks they just do it for the physical benefits, but it gives you more mental and emotional benefits than physical. I'm convinced. I can't quote the study, but I'm telling you, if you're not working out every day and you start working out, it'll change your life. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to be a crazy workout. It can be going for a 10-minute walk or doing 20 push-ups, but working out every day is super important. The other thing I wanted to comment real quick is you mentioned mindfulness. So a lot of people have heard the term mindfulness and they're not exactly sure what it is. Or some people talk about meditation. I tend to think that can seem intimidating, right? If you're not meditating right now, the idea of starting a meditation practice can seem overwhelming. So what I encourage people to do is at least once a day, close your eyes and take a deep breath. And if you can do that once a day, you're probably going to be better off than not doing that, right? And in that moment, of a deep breath, it's you investing in yourself and saying, hey, I need to calm my brain down. I need to chill out. And ideally, you go from 1 breath to 10 breaths to, maybe 5 minutes a day or something. But that's something that I've incorporated in my life the last couple of years, is a mindfulness meditation practice that helps a lot. The other kind of easy ways to get off after that, if you don't feel like meditating, I believe strongly in the silent commute, which means if you're commuting to work, turn the radio off, turn the podcast off once in a while, and just be silent with your thoughts during your commute. I also think steady state cardio, when you go for a run or you're on the rower, like it's really easy to listen to podcasts, and I love listening to podcasts. I listen to 80/20 podcasts all the time when I'm running. But once in a while, turn off the podcast, turn off the music, and just be with you and your thoughts and listen to those thoughts that are going on in your head.
Love it, man. Good shares. I'm curious on a couple points. One, kind of what's like the vibe for Army guys / military academy at West Point on meditation practices and mindfulness. I think in general, humans in general, it's been a huge uptick. I've noticed the last 10 years of people more so moving to that as a norm. I'm curious what it's like for maybe like your students, colleagues, brotherhood, everything like that.
Yeah, I think we're pretty reflective of where society is at right now. I think, 10 or 15 years ago, the idea of meditating, the idea of a football player meditating would be like, oh no, like you're crazy, right? That's foo-foo garbage. But I think if you are thinking like a meathead like that, and I say that as a self-described meathead, right? If you're like, hey, that's too foo-foo for me, I would just tell you to like YouTube mindfulness meditation, and I think you'll see some amazing warriors, amazing athletes, amazing business leaders that wholeheartedly buy into mindfulness and can talk about how much it's benefited them from. So we definitely, it's not like every cadet here meditates, but I think a good portion of them definitely believe in it.
That's cool, man. 2 kind of points that I want to take this interview down, if you're comfortable. I do kind of want to hear about the deployment to Afghanistan, if you'd be willing to go through any of that, because I feel like, similarly in the David Goggins chapter, when he's just talking about going through the Hell Weeks, and he's kind of leading the boat crew two, through one of the Hell Weeks there, I think his second attempt through there. I would love to hear anything that you could share on the mental aspect side and kind of what it was like to be deployed in Afghanistan. I feel like most people, unless they have served, obviously, would not know what that's like. And then kind of round out the interview talking about what the curriculum is like for your current job at West Point, kind of what that curriculum entails, what it looks like working with a cadet, even though we've brushed on that lightly. And then we'll kind of see where it goes from there to end out the interview. But yeah, man, would love to hear anything you're willing to share.
All right, so graduated West Point in 2009, and then was commissioned as a field artillery officer. So field artillery is like the big cannons, okay? Usually you're kind of behind the front lines firing, cannons towards the enemy. Mm-hmm. We get deployed to Afghanistan. I'm trained as a field artillery officer, getting ready to shoot big cannons, but we're in a counterinsurgency fight, which means instead of using tanks and your traditional World War II battlefields, it looks completely different. And we're going to the local bazaar, and we're meeting with village elders. So it's, I'm trained to be a field artillery officer. I go to Afghanistan, and I'm not in that job at all. I'm just doing counterinsurgency on a day-to-day basis. So get to Afghanistan, no idea what to expect. I was scared, right? Like I'm this tough guy. I'm ready for anything the world throws at me, but at the same time I was scared to death. I was like, am I going to be a wimp? Right? Like I don't want to be a wimp in combat. Am I going to be a good leader? Am I going to cry when the bullets start flying? Am I going to be able to handle all this? Like all that stuff was going through my head, right? And then we get to Afghanistan, and I'm not exactly trained for this counterinsurgency mission, but I'm made a platoon leader on the spot, which means, hey, you're in charge of these 30 people, and good luck. I hadn't done any of the train up to get to that point. So I'm in Afghanistan, brand new leader to this unit. I have 30 soldiers. I also don't exactly know what we're trying to accomplish. I would kind of ask my chain of command, like, what is it that we're trying to do? And it was kind of like bring peace and stability to the area. And then be like, well, what does bringing peace and stability to the area look like? And it was kind of like, hey, Lieutenant Plumstead, it's your job to figure that out. And that was like this huge burden on my shoulders of like, I don't know how to fight and win a war here. Mm-hmm. Like, what is going on? Head spinning. We start going on dismounted patrols, and I'm like, oh my goodness.
How old were you there, too? Yeah, just to give context, too. 'Cause I mean,
23 years old.
Oh my God.
College graduate, 23 years old. Like going on dismounted patrols, I'm like, man, if we get ambushed right now, like, this is not going to be good, right? Like, head spinning. Nutso, we are in combat. We could all die. What's going on? And I realized, like, I had the answers, right? Like, I didn't think I did because it was a new environment. There was all these excuses of why I wasn't prepared. Then it was like, no, I am prepared, right? Like, West Point trained me about leadership. They trained me about how to solve problems. The football team taught me how to take a group of soldiers or a group of football players and make them a cohesive unit. I know how to do these things. I have these skills. I just have to figure out a way to take a deep breath, to sit down, to set some goals, and work my way through this. So it took some time, but that's what I ended up doing. I ended up saying, like, hey, we need to go on a dismounted patrol every day. If we want to figure out what's good and bad about this area, we've got to spend a lot of time in this area. So we'd go on a dismounted patrol every day. I also wanted to learn a lot about the area. So I said, hey, I want to sit down with an Afghan elder every single day so I can get as much information as possible. I also said, hey, I'm not exactly trained in counterinsurgency tactics, but I ordered every book I could find to try to read all that so I could get that information as well. And then we'd go out on patrols, and I'd try to do my best, and I'd try to keep my soldiers safe, and I'd try to make sure we took the fight to the enemy. And sometimes we made mistakes, and we got blown up, and we got shot at, and people would get wounded. Had some really, really bad days, and there were times I would reflect on that and go, did I make mistakes? What could I have done differently? And for the most part, I'd come back to no. Given the information we had at the time, we were doing things correctly. But going forward, I need to make sure I start doing things differently, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm summing up like my lifetime of leadership lessons and stuff from Afghanistan. But I think it came down to like, war is super complex. It's hard to wrap your head around. Combat, even for someone who claims to be a tough guy like me, is super, super scary. But no matter whether it's combat or any other activity in your life, like whenever you can get like that, like take a deep breath, figure out what success looks like, try to build the team behind you and go, hey guys, this is crazy. We're in combat, we're in war, but like, let's do this, mm-hmm. right? And then once you start getting traction, you start feeling good about yourself. After we were 3 months in, we were no longer just like, hey, we're doing okay. Like, we were doing really good. We were taking the fight to the enemy. We were building schools. We were building local hospitals. Like, we were doing really good stuff, in my opinion. So. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, that's war for you, Carlos.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I'm happy to answer more questions too, but it was a transformative experience for me. And honestly, some people look back on their experiences in a very negative light, and I think there's a lot there, and I feel terrible for those people. For me personally, I look back at my deployment with a lot of pride. I'm very happy with what we did and what we built, and I'm better off for it.
Mm-hmm. How long was your deployment over there? 23 years old?
It was 12 months.
Uh-huh.
So it was like July to July. We were in what at the time we called the Wild Wild West. It was Farah province in the western part of Afghanistan.
Very cool, man. As cliche as it may seem, I think I can most concisely give it to you guys like this, which Plum is kind of outlining. It's like once you set goals or intentions of where you want to go, what you want to accomplish, who you want to be, to a certain extent, I almost think it's as simple as who do I need to be to accomplish those type of goals. And I forget where I was hearing it from, some type of ultra successful person I was, again, like trying to study, listen to. They were like, what did they sell? It was somebody that sold like a company or exited out of a company for like $1 billion. And they were like, you know what? I didn't feel anything from the $1 billion. What was the most satisfying thing is I realized, holy crap, like I've became like this amazing person. Just my day-to-day mindset and like how I derive joy, where I derive joy from is so much different from where I started to where I'm at. But the actual like, the end goal that I reached wasn't the fulfilling thing, or maybe it was like a hegemonic pleasure where it's only like, it might be like a very short temporary, something that makes you feel good, but what really it is like who you become and who you're being day to day, which we're kind of looping back to that point there, which is interesting. I want to ask, because I'm curious, what was the integration like? You were 23 in Afghanistan for a year, fighting in war, leading troops. Absolutely amazing, and I appreciate your service generally for that one, man. But I'm curious to hear kind of what your integration was like coming back to the United States after being in Afghanistan for a year. Me personally, it's extremely hard for me to imagine myself being in that position, and I know that there are a lot of troops or people that come back and have PTSD or terrible mental stuff going on. So I'm curious to hear that was for you, because obviously you're happy, healthy, awesome dude, helping people, 34 with 4 kids. So clearly that wasn't the case for you, at least to a significant extent.
Yeah, I think it's tough, and a lot of it's a huge emotional experience if you think about, number one, all the support, thankfully, that soldiers have in America today, right? Mm-hmm. So like you have a ton of support, which is amazing, but then in combat, like it's super scary. You always kind of have the risk of physical injury. You also, as a leader, have the risk of like making poor decisions that could get people hurt or killed. And then the intensity of day-to-day life, speaking for me, was extremely crazy, right? Like we would do dismounted patrols every day. We could have gotten blown up or gotten firefights on a daily basis. It wasn't daily for us. We got in plenty of them, but it wasn't daily. But there was always that fear, mm-hmm. Or that awareness that it could happen, right? And it was just this thing that like nothing else in the world mattered, right? Like my future didn't matter, my family didn't matter, Army football, who I love, didn't matter. Like none of that stuff mattered. Nothing in the world mattered besides I need to go out and keep my team as safe as possible and take the fight to the enemy today. Like that was it. And there was something kind of freeing about that, with no distractions, super, super focused. And then you come home, and I cried like a baby on the airplane coming home. It was an emotional experience for me, right? Mm-hmm. And then you get home and I'm like, what the hell do I do now? Right? Like normal people are not as intense as you are as a leader in combat. And I struggled with that for a while, right? Like I tried all these different hobbies and I tried different stuff going on, and I couldn't come to terms with it really. What I finally came to, which, maybe the last 5 years I've kind of lived my life like that, is like, I'm kind of an intense guy. Like how I lived in combat is just like how I need to live my life. But now it's not Now it's not trying to go kill bad guys or keeping people safe. Now it's, I want to be the best dad and husband I can be. And I want to do that with a crazy amount of intensity and passion. And then when I work at West Point with cadets, in those moments when I work with cadets, I want to try to be the best teacher, coach, and mentor I can be with cadets. I try so hard to try to help them change how they look at the world and to be able to break through mental barriers so they can truly see their potential and be the best they can be. And then when I look at my own real estate investing too, like I want to try to be the best real estate investor I can be, right? And you kind of put all that together. How I've dealt with that is one, I'm not good with idle time. I like being busy. And I also just want to bring intensity and passion to everything I do. And if there are people in my life or, situations in my life where I can't be passionate and I can't be intense, like it's probably not a good fit for me. Like it's just kind of who I am, whether it's a direct reflection of my combat experience, I don't know, but the person I am today is a pretty, intense, passionate person. So I just got to find activities and people that embrace that,
Love it, man. I'm curious to hear the structure that you have with the cadets and what that class looks like, and maybe some if it's a 13-week semester, whatever it may be, kind of like what that curriculum looks like, and maybe the 80-20 of what you're teaching. Even if so, I know that we've been probably talking a lot through that in this interview.
Yeah, so we teach a couple things. We teach a 40-lesson, 300 level, so college junior level performance psychology class that digs into all the science, right? Because it's one thing to read a book that says this is how this one person lived an awesome life. It's another thing to say, hey, we tried to apply the scientific method to top performers so we could tease out what do all those people have to help us do better. And that's what sport and performance psychology is it's a body of science that says this is how all these people do things to try to be better, right? Because it's the difference of just hearing that one story versus hearing a ton of stories, right? So we've got that 40 lesson course, and then we've got multiple 10 to 20 lesson courses that are all about, hey, this is the raw information about how to be your best, okay? And I'll give you some 80-20 of what that stuff is, okay? So goal setting. A lot of people like SMART goals, or they like creating vision statements. The 80-20 of goal setting, in my opinion, is this: daily goals. The big goal is good, but what you do on a daily basis is what really matters. And I think those should also be input goals, meaning goals that you can control. Okay, so you want your daily goal to be, I'm going to run a mile today. You don't want your daily goal to be, I'm going to run a mile in 7 minutes flat, because you might not be able to achieve that. So I want your daily goals to be stuff that is within your control. I also want your daily goals to have a yes or no answer, right? So there's no gray area, so you can't BS yourself. I don't want your goal to be, did I work out hard today, right? I want your goal to be, did I work out? Or did I stick to my workout routine, okay? Another big one is growth in fixed mindset we talk a lot about. Growth mindset means you believe that your talents, skills, and abilities can get better over time, can improve. And a fixed mindset means that you think your talents is fixed, that you're born with an IQ and you can't improve your IQ, right? I try to help people look at the world with a growth mindset. So when they say things like, I'm not good at math, or I'm not good at the bench press, or I'll never be a good leader, those are all reflections to me of them having a fixed mindset. So I try to help them look at the world and say, no, it's not that you're not good at math, it's that you've struggled in math, but when you put in the work, you can see improvement. We need to make sure we rephrase that. When you say you're not good at bench press, it's not that you're not good at bench press, it's just that you have to work really hard to get better, but let's put that work in. And then if you say, hey, I'm not a good leader, no, you are a good leader and you're continuing to get better every day. Let's acknowledge that West Point is a developmental experience and we have to keep growing. But to say you're a bad leader, just, that gives you an excuse to not put in the work. Okay, so growth mindset is super important. Confidence, right? Confidence is this huge concept, but here's my 80-20 of confidence. Is everyone's got a voice in their head. Okay, and that voice in your head could tell you, you can do this, you got this, or that voice in your head could say, you're in way over your head, you suck, this is never going to work. The troubling part is usually that voice flips back and forth about 10,000 times a day, right? Like you're feeling good about yourself, you believe in it, and then someone makes some comment, and you're like, oh my gosh, I suck at life, this is never going to work, people are judging me, right? So step number one, you have to become aware of that voice in your head. You have to know when it is helping you, when it is hurting you. And then step number two is you got to try to get it to help you more than it hurts you. And the best way to do that, I think, is through affirmations. And what an affirmation is some statement that makes you feel good about yourself, okay? I deal with a lot of cadets that question whether or not they actually belong at West Point. What can happen sometimes at West Point is people are the best of the best in their high school. Then they get to West Point where everyone's kind of the best of the best and they feel like maybe they don't belong. So what I work with cadets on is saying, I belong at West Point. I belong at West Point. I belong at West Point. If I can get them to start getting that into their head, I find that some of those doubts and some of that negative self-talk happens a lot less, right? So some of my affirmations are, I'm going to be a great dad today. My children love me. The cadets that I work with respect me, right? And I create affirmations all the time, depending on kind of what my self-talk is. But I think that's super important. I keep going, but I feel like you got a question or something.
No, dude, keep rolling if you want. I mean, I'm kind of, if you hear any typing or when I'm looking over, I'm kind of just taking bullet points on my note too for when I release the episode, and just so I could loop back to it. But if you want to keep going, man, amazing gives here.
Yeah, so I think goal setting, growth mindset, confidence, continuing to work on that voice in your head, because it's so easy to fall into a funk and not even realize that it's probably triggered by you telling yourself that you don't deserve something or that you're not good enough. And when you recognize that, trying to create affirmations that can argue with that voice in your head. I think, let's leave it there.
All right. Yeah, I mean, just to hit on a couple of these points, man, awesome gives. Goal setting is huge. I do like how you frame that, and it's kind of similar to what I like to do with principles, or I guess goals too, to a certain extent. You just make it really, really simple for your, like, the dumb part of your brain, where it's a yes or no, did I do this? Not if I did it in 7 minutes or whatever. It's like yes or no. Like, just make it super, super simple. Growth and fixed mindset, which ties into the affirmations, is absolutely huge. I'm a huge, huge believer in that. You're pretty much, and it's the same thing with like your simple reptilian brain. You're kind of just like telling your brain like how you want to wire, like and that's what I talk about in 80-20 Academy, like auto suggestion, where you're like intentionally programming your brain. Truest form of automating yourself, like automating the person you want to be, what you want to believe in, what type of actions you want to take. So that's absolutely huge. Love the affirmations. The cool, and I was gonna say scary, but I'll say more so interesting. The cool thing with affirmations is that you're only realizing like 3, 4, 5% of what you're actually telling yourself. Everything else is subconscious behind that. So that'll give you kind of like a little litmus test of like how you're operating, and that's why I kind of like try to study my dreams and stuff like that, kind of to see kind of just like where I'm vibing, where I'm thinking, when I'm asleep, when I have zero control over it. But that's the thing that can be good for you, is you can do that. You can do these affirmations. That's just your conscious mind, like 5% of your power, and that'll kind of give you like a litmus test of what's going on, beneath the iceberg there, as far as your subconscious mind, how it's programming, things of that nature. So that's super, super cool. A lot of good stuff to hit on there. And I said on one of the episodes, I think it was Tyler, when he was talking about his daughter. For the kids, one thing I like to get that I've got for my nieces and some of my friends that have younger children are these affirmation coloring books, which is pretty cool. It was the Jason Lucchese interview, actually, from about a year ago. So I have to get my nieces these coloring books so they can still like color, but it's like, I am beautiful, I am smart, I am talented, all that stuff. So they're kind of working on that, and I'm kind of just helping them impress their that's their uncle.
That's great.
Their uncle Los that is just trying to help impress their subconscious mind a little bit with some positivity and love, man. So you're obviously speaking my language as we chatted today.
One thing I think is important is if anyone's listening to the podcast, they should know. But if not, I get the impression from you that somehow you're able to implement like all of this stuff in your daily basis. You sound like a machine, right? Where, I went to West Point graduate, Army officer, master's degree in sport and performance psychology. Like my day is not nearly that regimented, right? Like I live by a calendar and I try really hard. But what I'm getting at is, I think it's okay to have completely different personalities. I think our personalities are somewhat different there. Like where for you like having a lot of that structured, where, maybe to a fault, I'm a little bit of a rebel, and I like having some structure. Like I like having a structured morning. I like maybe having a structured evening, but maybe not quite that much structure in my life. And then with, if you just heard me talk about the mindset and the confidence and you're like, hey, that's a little overwhelming, I can't do all of that. I think it's really easy to just say like, what is one of those things that I can take from this? Like we were talking in our previous conversation, right? Like you don't need to take all of this goodness and be like, now I'm going to change my life for the better today, right? Just like, hey, what's one thing I can do that maybe moves that needle a little bit? And then when that becomes your new normal, like, try moving the needle again.
And it's funny you say that, because the next point I was going to say, it's the same thing in principle. But one thing when I'm talking to like friends or colleagues, clients, whatever about this, I feel like a lot of people think like, okay, to be positive, to be a quote unquote positive person, if you have 40, 50,000 thoughts in a day, okay, I need all 40 or 50,000 of those to be positive. Not the case at all. And even myself, one of the most optimistic people I like to think that I know, it's really just a balance of, okay, if you have 50,000 thoughts in a day, say right now the ones that you're aware of, say they're evenly split 50-50, like 25,000 are negative, 25,000 are positive. It's not about trying to get the 25 negative to be positive. It's just working every day towards getting a few over, so you're just kind of tipping the needle. Same with this. And I would say just to give feedback on me, I definitely come off as like super, super structured, but I think by nature, it's because by nature I'm very like shoot from the hip loose. So I kind of put these guideposts in place that kind of it kind of may seem like it's a little like restrictive or like, damn, that's wild that you do that, but it actually gives me a little bit of freedom because I kind of just set these things in place and then can kind of just like flow and chill through my day to day. But it definitely did start, and that's one thing I go through on the 80-20 kind of my story and personal development, and even getting into like the routines and stuff and habits and affirmations and meditation, stuff like that, which is all different legs of the table, foundation for this type of stuff. I started off, I knew like when I started researching this stuff, I knew like writing in a journal, gratitude was good. Like that's just good for your brain. I know meditating's good. I know affirmations are good. You can do all these things. So before, probably like 4 or 5 years ago range, I know those things were good, and I would kind of be like, I would wake up one morning, I'd be like, I'm gonna meditate this morning. The next morning I'd wake up, I'm gonna read, Power of Positive Thinking. I'm gonna read something like that. Okay, I'm gonna go pick up basketball, Tuesdays and Fridays, that'll be my exercise. So it took me a little bit of time to get structure, and kind of what another principle you've been going through here, which is almost like death by 1,000 cuts, or I think it's Bruce Lee that says, I'm more afraid of the guy that practices one kick for 1,000 days versus the guy that practices 1,000 kicks in one day. So it's kind of what I did through my evolution. This may be helpful for more so people that you're specifically speaking to, that demographic of people that may be overwhelmed, that don't do somewhat similar stuff to this, is the book Miracle Morning. That's when I started getting structure to it, where it kind of takes a lot of the stuff me and Plum have been talking about, but you kind of just do it you kind of do each one in a quick 5-10 minute chunk. So ideally you're doing it in an hour or less just for the morning set. And that's something I do too, like, and I'm not perfect by any means, like quarantine time, I've definitely been working out a lot less and I'm using it as an excuse, even though I could have done better. with the gym closed, yoga studio not closed, injuries, stuff like that. So I definitely have not been perfect, and even doing like habit tracking, which it's so reassuring to hear. Even like Trevor Mock, like the guy who I got the Trabbit hacker from, one of my favorite humans in the world, he's even had like downtime. So that's another huge principle too, is like you have to live with a mindset of like always being able to strive for better, but also living in a state of like unconditional forgiveness. Like at the end of the day too, like, all right, gave my best, like I'm gonna get after it the next day. But it's a lot of those things compounded that go into it. And really my main structure are just around like the morning routine and the nightly routine. And then I kind of have different stuff saved in, like audio affirmations that I'll sometimes pop in and listen to. A podcast like 2 years ago I did roughly, I cut up my own David Goggins audio affirmation thing, where it's just clips from his first Joe Rogan interview. So like some of it to give you guys, if it does sound a lot of stuff, even to Plum maybe, for me right now it's pretty much just a morning, night, and then I kind of free flow. Like I just picked the meditation I was going to do this morning, kind of at random, kind of have a few in the tool belt now, and I was just feeling it this morning. But all good gives, man. Amazing stuff.
You know, I bring up that point not because I think you're crazy, even though you might be.
Everybody's crazy to their to a certain extent, for sure.
Right. I think some people discount that they could ever have a morning routine. Right. They say, hey, that's not for me. Or the idea of meditating, they go, hey, that's too woo woo for me. And the point I'm trying to make is just that, you know, trying to be your best can fit no matter your personality. If you're super organized, awesome. If you're a procrastinator, awesome. If you're whatever, like you can still try to perform better on a daily basis, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So you just got to figure out where you are and get a little bit better.
100%, man. So to kind of put a bow on this thing, I'm curious to hear just an overall general question. You can hit this with a broad stroke. You don't necessarily need to, blitz through the A gap here. You can kind of just do a front seven watching the QB here. I'm curious to hear what kind of legacy you want to leave behind and kind of your why. I know that's kind of a cliche question, and we've heard about your 4 sons, wife, everything like that. But I'm curious to hear just like what kind of legacy you want to leave, what kind of dent you want to put in the universe here. 34 years young. Modern medicine. Hopefully me and you are both chilling when we're like 110 years old, financially free, all that good stuff. So I'm curious to hear from that, just to put a bow on this thing. Yeah,
so interesting. And I've evolved my thinking on this too, right? Constant with me, I think, is questioning, what I think my philosophies are. So I used to talk about, Simon Sinek wrote the book Start With Why, and he gave an awesome TED Talk, and I loved it. So I used to always think like, hey, if you don't start with why, it's not going to work, right? And I've grown to think that for me, the why, like if you ask me what my why is, I would say my why is my family, right? But if you, again, look at my calendar, like I need to do a better job of that, right? Because there's clearly other motivations I have in my life besides my family, right? So I look at it, and same thing with legacy. Like, what do you want your legacy to be? It's kind of a crazy answer, but I try to say I'm not going to worry about if people remember me or if people don't remember me. Okay, what's my legacy? It's not something I want to be concerned about, and I'm not trying to poo-poo your question, because I think it's good. I just want to bring where I come at it from, and this is where I come at it from. Is I want to try to live the best life I can, with some balance of that delayed gratification and having fun in the moment. I want to try to be the best dad, the best husband, the best real estate investor, the best teach, coach, and mentor I can today. And then tomorrow, I hope I can be slightly better in all those things. And hopefully I live to 80 years old, and that accumulation will be, I've made a big change on the world, and people have been impacted by my life. But I found personally for me, if I get too much into the legacy discussion, I think it starts distracting me, and it makes me think more meta and more long term. And what I really want to do is just optimize today. So maybe a curveball answer I'm throwing at you, Carlos, but that's kind of how I look at it. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and it's not a curveball at all. It's a straight 92 mile per hour fastball down the pike, because you can tell a lot about people, and maybe that's just me being super perceptive, and just kind of that's kind of like my superhuman ability if I had to choose one or a few. But that's the same principles that we've been going through on this whole interview, kind of getting to unpack and get to know you more, of how you do like your goal setting is very day to day. Like, you don't want to think like off in the future. That's like the number one principle when we were talking about, the sports performance, the mental performance that you teach, is the very first thing that you went through is the goals. It's only on a daily basis. So you're almost diluting your focus and your performance in the moment for you personally if you're thinking too much about legacy. But a lot of things in life, it's like, it's a little bit of a paradox to a certain extent, and you kind of got to choose. That is life, in my opinion. Like, you're just living through different paradoxes and choosing the best from each end and incorporating your daily life, reflecting, seeing what works, and making pivots and adjustments, constantly until we're out of here one day. For sure. Well, dude, this has been an awesome interview. Like I said, I'm excited I'll definitely connect you with some other hosts, get you on some other interviews, and I will put the show note for the TED Talk, man. But it has been, as we've been teeing this up, and when you first emailed in, listening to, I forget which 80-20 episode, but has been an awesome time, been awesome getting to know you better, genuinely appreciate the way that you choose to live your life and how many people that you're helping. I can only imagine with the ripple effect there, but really inspiring stuff. And I'm excited after Corona season to come up to West Point, chilling a West Point Class 3. That'd be awesome.
I would love that. And I want to make a quick mention about real estate. We didn't really get into it. I've done a lot of real estate investing on the side, kind of passively, but we've started wholesaling, doing some wholesaling on the side. I've got an awesome team. Frank, Justin, Carlo, Adam, Aaron, Ryan, and Bobby. We've got a team that is doing great. They're super supportive. But the reason I'm pointing this out is we're just getting started in wholesaling. We're babies. We don't exactly know what we're doing. But a few years from now, we're going to be the biggest and best wholesalers in the United States.
Love it, brother.
So 80-20 podcast. I'm a little naive. I'm a little passionate and excited, but I'm saying it right here. We're going to be the biggest and best wholesalers in the United States in a few years.
Love it, brother. Absolutely love it. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed the episode here. Is there a best place to reach out to you? I guess I should ask you that prior to kicking this off. If you wanted to interact with anybody, if anybody wanted to chat it in. I know we have a lot of, even Tyler Paulson has given service, my boy, as well. Corey Lee's in the 80-20 group as well. What's the best place to reach out to you, your team, maybe follow along your journey, what you got going on?
Yeah, we've got a real estate website called Grayline Home Buyers. Grayline Group, Gray with an A, Gray. Grayline Home Buyers, Grayline Investments, if you're interested in getting on our cash buyers list. And then personally on Facebook, John Plumstead, Plumstead, or on Instagram or Twitter or whatever social media you're on. Hit me up. I'd love to connect.
Cool. Dealer's choice on how you reach out to Team Plum there. All right, guys. Well, take it easy. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Peace.
Be Navy.